Hello and a very good morning. You're watching the Breakfast News on Rajya Sabha television. I'm your host Frank Pereira. Here are the latest headlines. CBI Special Director Anil Sinha named the new chief of the investigating agency. Prime Minister-led committee picks the Bihar IPS officer to succeed Ranjit Sinha. Cabinet approves key bills in the meeting on Tuesday, gives green signal to a comprehensive anti-hijacking bill seeking death for hijackers. Massive turnout in Jharkhand and Jammu and Kashmir assembly polls continues. Second phase witnesses yet another record turnout in the valley with over 74% turnout. 30 years after the Bhopal gas tragedy, victims still wait for justice. Activists allege toxic waste is poisoning groundwater. And UN report at climate conference lists India among worst hit nations by extreme weather conditions in 2013. Well, the government has appointed Anil Sinha as the new chief of the Central Bureau of Investigation. He will take over from Ranjit Sinha, who retired on Tuesday. Anil Sinha was the special director, the second in command in the CBI. His name was among the shortlisted candidates chosen after a meeting at Prime Minister Narendra Modi's residence yesterday. A collegium comprising of the Prime Minister, Chief Justice of India H.L. Datu and Mallikarjun Kharge, the leader of the largest opposition party, the Congress, met for the first time after the anti-corruption Lokpal law was enacted in December. Anil Sinha is an IPS officer from Bihar. He has been a part of investigations of a number of disproportionate assets cases. He has also served as DIG and IG in the Special Protection Group in Delhi and Additional Secretary in the Central Vigilance Commission. Moving on now, the Cabinet has approved amendments in the Companies Bill Regional Rural Banks Act of 1976 and a comprehensive anti-hijacking bill. The Cabinet met on Tuesday to clear a number of changes to the Companies Bill to make it easier for corporates to do business and to ensure severe punishment for those raising illegal deposits from the public. Amendments in the Regional Rural Banks Act were also approved with an aim to strengthen their capital base and to bring flexibility in the shareholding. The government will also introduce a new and comprehensive anti-hijacking bill of 2014 seeking stringent punishment including the death penalty for hijackers. The cabinet also approved expansion of some of the national highways. Well, both Jammu and Kashmir and Jharkhand saw record voter turnouts in the second phase of the polling yesterday in the five-stage assembly elections. Jammu and Kashmir recorded 74% polling, while over 64% of eligible voters turned out in Jharkhand to cast their franchise.
Overall average percentage of the entire phase 2 is 71%, which compares with 68.79% in the general elections of 2008.
Another strong reply from Jammu and Kashmir, another rejection of anti-democracy elements days after the state had polled a record 70% in the first phase. Voting in this phase faced a backdrop of recent terrorist violence in the run-up and warnings from trouble elements. After a slow start, turnout figures made up later. Riyasi recorded the highest 80% polling, followed by 76% in Udhampur. 75% of eligible voters turned out to vote in Poonch. Some of the most sensitive areas, Kupwara, Kulgam, Gulabgarh, Gul Arnas and others recorded 60% plus turnout, substantial leaps over the last assembly elections.
सर्दी में इस वक्त आया है कि हमें बहुत परेशानियां हैं, सैलाब भी आया है, यहाँ बेरोजगारी भी है, डेवलपमेंट की बातें भी है, इसलिए हमें पावर की कमी है, इसलिए हमें वोट डालना पड़ता है कि लोकल इंतजामिया, लोकल जो हमारे काम मसाइल है वो हल किया जाएगा.
In all the poll-bound 20 segments in Jharkhand, it was brisk polling from the start amid tight security and a large team of observers from the state and centre. In just 4 hours, over 32% of the electorate had cast their ballot. The count was 50% plus at 1 p.m., setting the stage for a turnout bigger than the 62% recorded in the first phase.
On average, till now, the turnout is known to be 64.99%. 64.99% in the entire state for the second phase for 20 assembly constituencies. and if you add first phase and second phase together, then the turnout is so far is 64.23%.
The highest number of tribal constituencies went to polls in this phase. 16 out of 20 segments are reserved for scheduled castes. Outcomes here will reflect tribal expectations. That's besides two key urban segments, Jamshedpur East and Jamshedpur West, the first truly urban centres going to polls in the ongoing elections. They'll reflect the trend for voting in Ranchi and Dhanbad. In the sustained high turnout, analysts point out signals of a desire for change.
बेरोजगारी बढ़ते ही जा रहा है, देखते हैं नक्सल प्रभावित एरिया है, कुछ नहीं करते हैं सरकार, जहाँ था जब तब मार के चल जाते हैं। खूंटी तो ऐसे भी पॉपुलर हो चुका है, जब किसी को भी जो भी बिजनेस करते हैं वो लोग लेवी वसूलते हैं, ये सब सुधरेगा। इसीलिए सोच रहे हैं इस बार कुछ नई सरकार, इतने साल में मतलब 10 साल हो गया होगा, 8 बार तो हम लोग चीफ मिनिस्टर बदल चुके हैं।
Both Jammu and Kashmir and Jharkhand now go to polls in the third phase of the 5-stage elections on the 9th of December. December 23rd is the counting day for both states. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Moving on now, Home Minister Rajnath Singh visited Chhattisgarh yesterday to pay homage to the 14 CRPF men killed in the Maoist attack in Sukma district. He announced 38 lakh rupees as ex gratia payment to the relatives of each of the CRPF Jawans martyred in Sukma and 65,000 rupees to each of the injured. Here's more.
A day after the deadly ambush and massacre of the 14 CRPF Jawans by Maoists in the Sukma district of Chhattisgarh, the Home Minister expressing his condolences to the families of the victims.
सुकमा जिले में जो घटना घटित हुई है यह दुर्भाग्यपूर्ण और उसकी मैं घोषणा करता हूँ।
Meanwhile, the state government airlifted the injured security personnel to a hospital in Raipur.
14 जवान शहीद हो चुके हैं। 15-20 की जो मुझे प्राप्त जानकारी आई कि 15-20 जो है घायल हैं। अभी सब घायलों को रायपुर पहुंचाने का प्रयास किया गया है और जो शहीद हुए उनको भी रायपुर लाएंगे।
In neighbouring Uttar Pradesh, family members mourned the loss of CRPF Deputy Commandant B.S. Verma, who was one of the victims of the tragedy. Verma is survived by his wife, 2 children, parents and younger brother Arun.
लगभग 2 दिन पहले हुई थी, तो उन्होंने कहा था 2 तारीख को हम आ जाएंगे। आज को आना था उनको वापस सर्च के लिए, सर्च अभियान में था।
कैसे सूचना आपको मिली?
हमें शाम को बाई फ़ोन से सूचना मिली थी, तो उन्होंने कहा हमला हुआ, तो हम लोगों ने न्यूज़ चैनल देखना शुरू कर दिया। फिर रात में इन्होंने रिटर्न में बताया कि ये घटना हुई।
The uncle of another dead soldier, Radhesham Paswan, said the family was grief-stricken but at the same time felt proud of their son.
दुखी हूँ, भारत के लिए शहीद, देश के रक्षा के लिए शहीद हुआ, मैं इसके लिए दुखी नहीं हूँ।
Political leaders said that the ruling BJP government needs to revisit its strategy of engaging with the extremists.
Such rampant instances of Naxalism, and this instance where 14 of our personnel have died, is the biggest this year. It is time to rethink the strategy on Naxalism and on Naxal terror, and to ensure that Modi government deals with them with an iron hand.
The government has indicated that it is taking this threat seriously. We must deal with these issues on 2 fronts. One is by cracking down with force, but the other also has to be to extend more developmental activities in those areas, and I hope both will be done.
14 suspected Naxalites were also killed in Monday's gunfight that lasted over 4 hours. 15 people were injured. The Naxalites carried off sophisticated weapons belonging to the security personnel in the encounter. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, after a month-long standoff over sharing of ministerial berths, the Shiv Sena and the BJP came to an agreement on Tuesday. The Sena has decided to join the Devendra Fadnavis-led government in Maharashtra. According to the pact, Sena will be allotted 12 ministries, out of which 5 berths will be of cabinet rank. The swearing-in ceremony is likely to take place on Wednesday. This development comes a day after Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis appeared about the outcome of the talks with the Shiv Sena saying negotiations over power sharing were 70 to 80% complete. However, the formal announcement in this regard is likely to be delayed in the wake of the demise of Congress veteran and former Maharashtra Chief Minister A.R. Antule. Well, it's time now for some other stories from across the country in our segment Nationwide. India successfully conducted the first user trial of its long-range nuclear-capable surface-to-surface Agni-4 missile on Tuesday. It was tested from the Wheeler Island off the state coast in Odisha. The strategic missile has the capability to hit targets 4,000 kilometers away. 3 accused in the Burdwan blast have been sent to judicial custody till the 5th of December. They were remanded to judicial custody on a prayer by the NIA, which had taken them in its own custody on the 28th of November for interrogation. Public sector bank employees of the northern region will continue their relay strike today in the north zone. The day-long strike today is to press for wage hike. Normal banking operations in the states of Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, Punjab and Delhi would be affected due to the strike. This comes a day after bank employees of the southern region observed a day-long strike. This is the second strike by bank employees in less than 30 days. Well, that was Nationwide. Let's now take a look at some other news events lined up for today in our segment, The Day Ahead. Maharashtra Chief Minister A.R. Antule, or rather former Chief Minister A.R. Antule, will be cremated at his native Ambet village in Raigad district today. A 3-day mourning has been declared in the state as a mark of respect to the departed leader. Now, Antule died yesterday at the age of 80 plus after prolonged illness. He was a Congress veteran and served as Maharashtra Chief Minister from June 1980 to January 1982. He was also the Minority Affairs Minister in the Manmohan Singh-led UPA government. Congress Vice President Rahul Gandhi will leave for Amethi today on a 2-day visit. In his visit, Rahul will meet local party workers to discuss organizational issues. He will also visit Tiloi, Salon, Jagdishpur and Guriganj areas. During his visit, he is also likely to attend a program to mark the completion of 10 years of the Sanjay Gandhi Eye Hospital. Leaders of the Delhi Congress will participate in a day-long closed-door workshop today. The focus will be on the upcoming Delhi Assembly polls along with a host of other organizational issues. A critical analysis of the Assembly seats where the AAP and the BJP had increased their vote share in the recent Lok Sabha elections in comparison to last year's Assembly polls will also be discussed. A Mumbai Sessions Court will take up hearing in the Salman Khan hit-and-run case today. The actor has been directed to be present in today's hearing. In the last hearing, the court had expressed displeasure over the case being unnecessarily dragged and ordered it to be concluded by the end of this month. It's time for a short break now, but still to come on the show. On the 30th anniversary of the Bhopal gas tragedy, we take a look at how the city is still grappling with the disaster. Back, you're watching Rajya Sabha television. Well, 30 years after the Bhopal gas tragedy, the victims, their families and residents of the city still grapple with the grim reminder of the disaster. Activists allege that the toxic waste left behind after the tragic accident still continues to poison the groundwater and no one is taking responsibility for cleaning up. Here's more.
On the night of 2nd December 1984, the factory owned by the US multinational Union Carbide Corp. accidentally leaked cyanide gas into the air. Thousands of people were killed. Most of them were poverty-stricken residents of Bhopal. 30 years later, the toxic legacy continues.
17 studies, both government and non-government agencies, have shown that up to 3 kilometers or 3.5 kilometers from the factory and at depths greater than 30 meters, there are chemicals that cause all this damage, cause cancers, birth defects, chemicals like chlorobenzene, dichlorobenzene, benzene hexachloride, hexachlorocyclohexane, nickel, chromium, mercury in very, very high amounts. And yet nothing has been done.
Activists want either the government to clear up the waste itself or pursue Union Carbide to take responsibility.
The toxic waste needs to be cleaned up, both in the site but also outside. It's affected the soils and the water, so that's why it's creating health issues for people, not just the toxic waste health issues of gynecological reproductive issues affecting women, but it's now affecting the general population.
The Union Carbide plant was built in 1969, seen as a symbol of a new industrialized India. It generated thousands of jobs, but just 15 years later, it became a killer, becoming responsible for 5,295 deaths. Activists claim 25,000 people died in the years following the tragedy. 1 lakh people continue to suffer today with sicknesses like cancer, blindness, respiratory problems, immune and neurological disorders.
लग रहा है कजा फरियानी जाए, आँखन में डाला पड़ गया, हाँ, मर्ची की नहीं जले, फरियानी जाए.
In 2012, the government was forced to recognize that the water was contaminated when the Supreme Court ordered clean drinking water to be supplied to some 22 communities around the factory site.
एक लड़की की तो पूरा छाले हो गए, ये गैस का वजह से, और इनको हो गया पूरा ये गले में पूरी फेफड़ा सब खराब हो गया, ये गैस का ही वजह से हुआ, नहीं तो पहले नहीं थे, तो जब से कम 15 साल से हो रहा है ऐसे. बीमार होते दवाई करते 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 परेशान हो गए सब.
Union Carbide agreed to pay an out-of-court settlement of $470 million in damages in 1989. The company claims the government took control of the site in 1998, assuming all accountability, including the cleanup. Studies thereafter confirmed water pollution, but the hazardous waste remains in pits in 21 locations within the 68-acre site. It still remains buried in a wasteland, largely due to wrangles between authorities and activists on its disposal. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Joining me for a chat this morning is Sunita Narayan, Director General of the Centre for Science and Research. Sunita, thank you for joining me on the program. I mean, let's talk about this dastardly disaster now. Of course, 30 years on, and the people of Bhopal, people who are affected by this unfortunate tragedy, still grapple to come to terms with it.
No, absolutely. And I think what this disaster tells us is the fact that we just are completely unprepared to deal with an industrial disaster of the scale of Bhopal. The fact is that we still don't know who the victims of Bhopal are. And this is clear. The biggest problem is that the medical research that should have been done after the accident happened, after the disaster happened, never happened. ICMR stopped its studies. As a result of it today, you do not know whether the people have long-term chronic illnesses because of the gas leak. You do not know how the toxic waste, which is still lying there, is exacerbating those illnesses. And so one of the biggest problems today is the lack of information about medical problems and therefore what treatment needs to be given. And because we don't have this, we don't know how to compensate them. We don't know how to provide relief to them. And I think this is really where we need to learn how important it is to, one, make sure we can do the medical studies, but two, take the action that is needed to remove the waste that is still lying there. Indeed. It is absolutely unacceptable that this huge amount of waste continues to pollute the groundwater in Bhopal.
Indeed, that is one aspect of it, of course, and the other aspect of it is the fact that the victims and their kin have still not been granted justice. 30 years on, no arrests made. The Warren Anderson is no more. So, whom are we going to pin responsibility on, really?
I think we need to move beyond, in my view, we need to now move beyond these issues and really start looking at justice in very real terms for the victims. What do the victims need? One, they definitely need the waste that is lying there cleared. Now, we need two things to be done. There is an action plan on how the waste has to be removed. Governments are not taking responsibility. They are arguing that the matter is sub judice. NGOs and governments are wrangling over what should be the best way. It is time we took the hard steps that are needed to deal with the toxic waste.
Indeed. So
secondly, we need to establish liability of Dow Chemicals on the waste that is lying there. The fact is, this waste that is lying in Union Carbide has nothing to do with the accident. This is to do with when Union Carbide was operating its plant. So Dow Chemicals has liability for this. This has to be established. They should pay for it. And thirdly, government should make sure that they provide universal care to all people in Bhopal simply because they don't have the medical records that are needed to provide, to identify who the victims are.
The authorities are wrangling with each other, like you just mentioned just now, of course. So who's really going to be responsible to clear this mess there in Bhopal? Who should be held accountable? And, what's likely to happen?
That's a very good question, and I think that's really the real tragedy of Bhopal. The fact is, the number of institutions that are involved in Bhopal is nobody's business. There is the High Court of Madhya Pradesh, there is the Supreme Court which is listening to the case, there is the Ministry of Environment and Forests which has a separate committee on the toxic waste. The Union Ministry has appointed the Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers as the nodal ministry. In Bhopal, you have a separate department for Bhopal gas disaster and relief. You have the pollution control boards. So there is huge amount of multiplicity of authority, and this is one of the biggest problems of Bhopal. I think it is time that the High Court, which I think is taking the most important steps here, makes it clear that one department is responsible. An action plan has already been agreed upon. This action plan has to be implemented in a time-bound manner. And I think it's time we are much more serious about implementation rather than blame games.
Indeed. All right. Very well put there, Sunita. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning and sharing your views on this particular subject. Moving on to some international news now. Israel's Prime Minister has sacked his finance and justice ministers and declared he wants parliament dissolved, triggering an early general election. The Israeli Prime Minister claimed that the two ministers, Yair Lapid and Zipi Livni, have attacked the government and quietly tried to form an alternative coalition. With next year's budget not agreed and growth slowing in the wake of the July-August Gaza war, Lapid accused Netanyahu of putting his political interests before those of Israel. Livni denied Netanyahu's accusations and said that the Prime Minister had been working behind the scenes to replace them. Netanyahu said that he wanted an election 2 years early to win a clear mandate to lead Israel. Disagreements over a series of economic and political policies have strained relations within the coalition.
ועל כן לפני זמן קצר הנחיתי את מזכיר הממשלה להוציא מכתבי פיטורים לשרים לבני ולפיד. ועל כן, גם מסיבת הצורך להביא להתנהלות ולממשלה יציבה ותקינה, על כן החלטתי לפעול לחקיקת חוק לפיזור הכנסת.
Well, India is among the nations which has been worst hit by extreme weather conditions in 2013. The Global Climate Risk Index came out with its report at the UN Climate Conference in Peru. It has included Philippines and Cambodia in the list of countries as well. India witnessed the flash flood tragedy in Uttarakhand and Cyclone Philin in 2013, which claimed thousands of lives. The report said that the Philippines suffered most because of 6,300 people being killed when Typhoon Haiyan struck a year ago and caused $13 billion in damages. Overall, the study found that more than 5 lakh people had died worldwide from 15,000 extreme weather events in the last 2 decades. The United Nations panel of climate scientists has said that the impacts of the global warming can be found on every continent, with rising temperatures causing more heat waves, downpours and rising sea levels.
In the Philippines, Typhoon Haiyan was the strongest tropical storm to ever make landfall in the country. And as I said, framed the climate talks last year. Cambodia had severe flooding. In India, we had also a cyclone hitting the country, the second largest on record. But it's not only developing countries that are affected. Developed countries are not in our top 10 this year, but the United Kingdom is quite high and rank 11, especially in terms due to the economic damage sustained.
Well, it's time now for some other stories from across the world in our World Wrap. Yes, President Barack Obama has asked the Congress for more funds to fight the deadly Ebola outbreak in West Africa. During a visit to the National Institutes of Health, Obama called on Congress to pass a $6.2 billion emergency budget to fight the deadly virus. Ebola has so far taken more than 6,000 lives in Africa. Obama said that squelching the disease was an urgent priority. NATO has agreed to launch a new training mission for Afghanistan next year. The mission will replace the combat troops who pull out by the end of the year after 13 years of war. The mission, named Resolute Support, will start on Jan 1st, 2015, the day after the NATO combat mission ends. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has sacked his interior minister and replaced the police chief following the massacre by Islamist group Al-Shabaab. Kenyatta vowed to continue to fight against Al-Shabaab, saying they will not flinch in war against terrorists. Earlier, Al-Shabaab had killed 36 quarry workers while they were asleep in their tents in the northeastern region of the country. At least 39 people have been killed in a suspected Boko Haram attack on Monday. 33 of the dead were policemen and 6 were soldiers. 20 militants were also reportedly killed in the attack. Nigeria's military had to use ground and air forces to repulse the insurgents from the city following their drone raid. Well, time now for all the sports actions from across sports arenas around the world in our latest sports beat. Atletico de Kolkata inched closer towards clinching a semi-final berth as they played out a goalless draw with Delhi Dynamos in their Indian Super League match on Tuesday. The draw didn't harm the Kolkata outfit much as they now have 18 points from 12 games. For Dynamos, Suvik Chakraborty's miss hurt the team badly as 14 points from 12 games kept them in 5th position. The opening test match between Australia and India will now begin in Adelaide on December 9th. It was earlier scheduled to begin tomorrow at the Gabba in Brisbane but was postponed following Philip Hughes' death last week. The incident forced Cricket Australia to reschedule the test series against India. This shift will allow the second test to be played in Brisbane from December 17 to 21st, with the traditional Boxing Day clash in Melbourne remaining unchanged. The Vatican cricket team attended a memorial mass in Rome for Australian cricketer Philip Hughes. Hughes died on Thursday after being hit by a bouncer from Sean Abbott during a domestic match, triggering a huge outpouring of grief in Australia and around the world. Hughes played 26 tests for Australia and became the youngest player ever to score 2 centuries in a match. His funeral will be held today. Well, that's it on this edition of the news. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day.